Okay, you're fast. How about some beans?
Think sleeping rough for one-night camping is hard? Frontier settlers dealt with conditions that would make modern insomniacs look like they had it easy. No mattresses, no climate control, no safety, just dirt, danger, and the constant fear that something was about to kill you in your sleep. Their struggle wasn't just surviving the day, it was making it through the night without freezing, burning, getting bitten, or being murdered. And it all started with one brutal reality. Where you slept could determine whether you woke up at all. The ground was your mattress on the frontier, and the ground didn't care about your comfort. Settlers would bed down directly on dirt, rocks, and whatever else happened to be there. No camping pads, no air mattresses, just hard earth that sucked the warmth from your body all night long. Rocks and roots dug into your back, hips, and shoulders. You'd shift position constantly, trying to find a spot that didn't hurt. But every position was uncomfortable. Sleep came in brief, fitful intervals, between adjusting your body and trying to ignore the pain. Cowboys on cattle drives had it worst. They'd ride all day, then bed down wherever the herd stopped. No choosing a comfortable spot. You slept where the trail boss said, and that was usually on ground that hadn't been cleared or prepared in any way. The lucky ones had bedrolls. These were canvas tarps wrapped around a single blanket. You'd lay the canvas on the ground, wrap yourself in the blanket, and pull the canvas over you. This provided minimal protection from ground moisture and some insulation, but calling it comfortable would be generous. Bedrolls got filthy within days. Dirt, sweat, and grime soaked into the fabric. Washing them was nearly impossible on the trail. Most cowboys went months without cleaning their bedding. The smell was overwhelming, but everyone stank equally, so nobody complained. The canvas would stiffen with dried sweat and dirt, becoming almost cardboard-like. This stiff material would crack and tear, letting in moisture and cold air. A worn-out bedroll was barely better than sleeping on bare ground. Some cowboys used their saddles as pillows. Leather saddles were hard, oddly shaped, and smelled like horse sweat. But they kept your head off the ground and away from crawling insects. The discomfort was worth the slight protection. Miners in camps had slightly better arrangements, but only slightly. Bunkhouses were crowded wooden structures with rows of bunks stacked 2 or 3 high. These weren't comfortable beds. They were rough wooden frames with rope or canvas stretched across. The rope would sag over time, creating a hammock effect that put your spine in terrible positions. You'd wake up with back pain that lasted all day. Tightening the ropes was a constant chore that most miners were too exhausted to bother with. Canvas bunks were worse. The fabric would stretch and tear, creating gaps where your body would sink through. Some miners would wake up essentially sleeping on the wooden frame with canvas barely supporting them. Mattresses in mining camps were usually burlap sacks stuffed with straw or dried grass. These provided minimal cushioning and became compressed flat within weeks. The straw would break down into dust that you'd breathe all night, causing respiratory problems. But the sleeping surface was just the beginning of frontier sleep problems. Temperature extremes made actual rest nearly impossible. Frontier nights could swing from freezing to scorching depending on season and location. Desert regions that hit 100 degrees during the day would drop to near freezing at night. Your body never adjusted because the extremes were too severe. Winter nights were brutal. Temperatures would plunge below zero with nothing but a single blanket and maybe a fire for warmth. Cowboys would sleep fully clothed, including boots and hats, trying to retain any body heat possible. The ground froze solid in winter, becoming even harder and more uncomfortable. It also conducted heat away from your body faster than unfrozen ground. You'd wake up shivering violently, unable to get warm no matter how tightly you wrapped your blanket. Fires provided some warmth but created their own problems. You'd position yourself near the fire, getting one side warm while the other side froze. Then you'd flip over, warming the cold side while the warm side cooled down. All night long, this rotation continued. The fire would die down as you slept. Someone had to wake up every few hours to add wood. This meant nobody got uninterrupted sleep. You'd either volunteer for fire duty or be woken by the cold when the fire died. Sparks from fires would land on blankets and clothing, burning holes. Cowboys would wake up to find their bedding smoldering. Some men were burned in their sleep when sparks landed on them directly. Fire safety and warmth were constantly at odds. Summer brought opposite problems. Desert heat didn't disappear at night. You'd lie on hot ground that radiated heat for hours after sunset. Sweating through your clothes and blankets made sleep impossible. The heat attracted insects. Mosquitoes swarmed in clouds around any water source. Cowboys would be bitten hundreds of times per night. The itching and buzzing made sleep nearly impossible, even when exhaustion demanded it. Some men would try sleeping without blankets in summer heat. But night temperatures could still drop significantly, leaving you shivering by dawn. You'd start the night too hot, end it too cold, and never find a comfortable middle ground. Speaking of insects, the crawling, biting, stinging creatures of the frontier made every night a battle. Bed bugs infested every bunkhouse, hotel, and homestead on the frontier. These parasites lived in mattresses, blankets, and wooden bed frames. They'd emerge at night to feed on sleeping people, leaving itchy welts that lasted for days. There was no effective treatment for bed bugs in the 1800s. Once they infested a sleeping area, they were nearly impossible to eliminate. Miners and cowboys just accepted being bitten every night as a normal part of life. The psychological impact was severe. You'd lie awake feeling phantom crawling sensations, never sure if it was real bugs or your imagination. This constant vigilance prevented deep sleep even when you were exhausted. Lice were equally common. Body lice lived in clothing and bedding, biting constantly and spreading diseases like typhus. Frontier people would spend time before bed picking lice from their clothes and crushing them. This was called reading your shirt because you'd examine the seams closely. Fleas jumped from person to person in crowded sleeping areas. Bunkhouses and wagon trains were perfect breeding grounds. The bites were intensely itchy, and scratching them raw led to infections that could turn deadly without antibiotics. Mosquitoes in frontier regions were described as being large enough to carry off small children. That's an exaggeration, but barely. Swarms would descend on sleeping camps, biting any exposed skin. The buzzing alone was enough to prevent sleep. Some settlers would sleep under netting if they could afford it. But netting was expensive and easily torn. Most people just endured the bites, waking up covered in welts and dried blood from scratching in their sleep. Ticks were a constant threat in grasslands and forests. They'd crawl onto sleeping people and embed themselves, feeding for hours. Waking up to find ticks attached to your body was a regular occurrence. Removing them improperly could leave the head embedded, causing infections. But insects weren't the only creatures invading frontier sleep. Larger, more dangerous animals posed serious threats. Rattlesnakes sought warmth at night and would crawl into bedrolls with sleeping people. The snake wasn't being aggressive, it just wanted the body heat. But rolling over onto a rattlesnake in your sleep meant a potentially fatal bite far from medical help. Cowboys learned to shake out their bedrolls before climbing in, and again in the morning before putting on boots. Scorpions and spiders would hide in the folds of blankets and inside boots. A scorpion sting first thing in the morning could ruin your entire day. Tarantulas were common in the Southwest. While not deadly, their bites were painful, and their appearance was terrifying. Waking up to find a tarantula on your chest or face was a frontier nightmare that happened regularly. Wolves and coyotes would circle camps at night, their howling keeping everyone on edge. While attacks on humans were rare, the constant noise and presence of predators made relaxation impossible. You'd sleep lightly, startling awake at every sound. Bears were attracted to food smells in camps. They'd wander through looking for supplies, sometimes stepping over or on sleeping people. Most bears weren't interested in humans, but a startled bear could kill you instantly. Sleeping near food storage was dangerous, but sometimes unavoidable. Mountain lions hunted at night and saw sleeping humans as potential prey. Attacks were rare, but did happen. The knowledge that a predator might be watching you sleep created constant anxiety that prevented deep rest. Mice and rats would crawl over sleeping people searching for food, crumbs, and clothing and bedding. They'd nibble on anything, including hair, fingernails, and exposed skin. Waking up to a rat on your face was common enough that people barely reacted. The wildlife threats were constant and real. Every night was a gamble. Most nights you'd wake up fine. But the possibility of snake bites, scorpion stings, or predator attacks meant you never truly relaxed into deep, restorative sleep. And if the animals didn't keep you awake, the weather certainly would. Rain turned sleeping areas into mud pits. Canvas tarps and wagon covers leaked. You'd wake up soaking wet, lying in puddles, with no way to dry off until the sun came up. Wet blankets provided no warmth and took days to dry in humid conditions. Wind was relentless on the open prairie. It would whip blankets off sleeping people, blow dust and debris into faces, and create a constant roaring noise that made sleep difficult. Securing your bedding against wind was a nightly challenge. Dust storms could bury sleeping camps. People would wake up covered in inches of fine dust that got into eyes, noses, mouths, and lungs. Breathing was difficult, and the grit would work its way into every piece of clothing and bedding. Lightning storms on the prairie were terrifying. With no shelter and often camped in open areas, settlers were exposed to strikes. The thunder was deafening, the lightning blinding, and the very real possibility of being struck kept everyone awake and terrified. Flash floods could appear without warning. A storm miles away would send water rushing down dry creek beds. Camps positioned in low areas would be swept away. People drowned in their sleep when floods hit at night. Choosing where to bed down was literally life or death. Snow would accumulate on sleeping people in winter. You'd wake up buried, struggling to dig yourself out before suffocating. The weight of snow on blankets made breathing difficult and added to the cold that was already unbearable. Hailstorms would pelt sleeping camps with ice chunks. There was no protection except pulling blankets over your head and enduring the painful impacts. Hail could cause serious injuries and damage to supplies and equipment. The lack of shelter meant you were completely exposed to whatever weather came. Modern camping gear is designed to protect against elements. Frontier settlers had canvas and wool at best. Most nights that wasn't enough. But even if you found shelter from weather and animals, the noise of frontier life made quiet sleep impossible. Cattle herds were never quiet. Thousands of animals shifting, lowing, and moving created constant noise. Cowboys sleeping near the herd heard this all night. The sounds would blend into a background roar that prevented deep sleep. Horses would whinny, stamp, and move around their picket lines. A spooked horse could start a chain reaction, waking the entire camp. Horse thieves were common, so unusual horse behavior meant everyone grabbed weapons and investigated. Snoring in crowded bunkhouses was legendary. 30 men sleeping in one room meant a chorus of snores, snorts, and breathing problems. Miners worked in dusty conditions that damaged their lungs, making their breathing even louder and more labored. Some men snored so loudly they'd be kicked, punched, or have boots thrown at them by frustrated bunkmates. This would wake everyone up, starting arguments and sometimes fights. The disruption meant nobody got back to sleep quickly. Nightmares and sleep talking were common. Men dealing with trauma, violence, and harsh conditions would cry out in their sleep. This would wake others, who'd then have trouble falling back asleep. The cycle repeated throughout the night. Drunks returning to bunkhouses late would stumble around, making noise and disturbing everyone. Frontier towns had no noise ordinances. Saloons operated all night, and the sounds of drinking, gambling, and fighting carried into sleeping areas. Guard duty meant someone was always awake and moving around. Sentries would walk perimeters, check on livestock, and maintain fires. Their movements and occasional calls to other guards created constant low-level noise. Coughing was epidemic in mining camps and dusty trail conditions. Men with lung problems would cough violently throughout the night. In crowded sleeping quarters, one person's coughing fit would wake dozens of others. The sounds of the frontier never stopped. There was no quiet hour, no expectation of silence. Sleep happened despite the noise, not because of peaceful conditions. Your brain never fully shut down because auditory threats required constant monitoring. But perhaps the worst aspect of frontier sleep was the fear, the knowledge that danger could strike at any moment. Cowboys slept with guns within arm's reach. Outlaws, hostile encounters, and wild animals meant you needed to be armed even while sleeping. But having a loaded weapon near your head created its own anxiety. Accidental discharges killed people regularly. Someone would roll over onto their gun, or reach for it in the dark and accidentally pull the trigger. Sleeping near armed men who might shoot first and ask questions later was terrifying. Night watch rotations meant you'd be woken up for your shift. Just as you'd finally fallen into deep sleep, someone would shake you awake for 2 hours of guard duty. You'd stumble around half asleep, trying to stay alert while exhausted. The fear of raids kept everyone on edge. Outlaw gangs, hostile groups, and thieves all operated at night. Camps would be attacked while people slept. Waking up to gunfire and chaos was a real possibility every single night. Some men would sleep in their boots with guns in hand, ready to jump up fighting at any moment. This constant state of readiness prevented the deep relaxation necessary for restorative sleep. Your body never fully rested. Paranoia was common and justified. In lawless territories, your fellow travelers might rob or kill you. Sleeping near strangers meant trusting them not to murder you for your supplies. That trust was often misplaced. The psychological toll was enormous. Chronic sleep deprivation combined with constant fear created mental health problems that had no treatment. Men would become irritable, paranoid, and sometimes violent from lack of proper rest. Different groups on the frontier had their own unique sleep challenges that made rest even more difficult. Wagon train families slept in cramped wagons, with entire families sharing tiny spaces. Parents, children, and sometimes grandparents would be packed into areas smaller than a modern closet. Privacy didn't exist, and personal space was a luxury nobody had. Children would cry, kick, and move around in their sleep. Parents couldn't rest because they were constantly being disturbed by their kids. But there was nowhere else to sleep. The ground outside was more dangerous than the cramped wagon. Soldiers at frontier forts had barracks that were only slightly better than sleeping outside. Wooden buildings with gaps in the walls let in wind, rain, and snow. The bunks were hard, the blankets were thin, and the conditions were miserable. Military discipline meant lights out at a specific time, but that didn't mean sleep was possible. Soldiers would lie awake, cold and uncomfortable, waiting for morning. Exhaustion was just part of military life. Homesteaders in sod houses dealt with dirt falling from ceilings onto their beds. Sod roofs would leak mud when it rained. Insects lived in the sod walls and would emerge at night. The houses were dark, damp, and depressing. Entire families would sleep in one room, often in one bed. Parents and multiple children would share sleeping space, making rest nearly impossible. The lack of privacy affected mental health and family dynamics. Prospectors sleeping in mining camps had the worst conditions of all. They'd work exhausting shifts, then sleep in whatever space they could find. Some slept in the mines themselves, breathing toxic air and risking cave-ins even while resting. The competition for sleeping spots in crowded camps led to fights. Men would claim bunks and defend them violently. New arrivals would sleep on floors or outside until they could secure better arrangements. Hotel beds in frontier towns were only marginally better than sleeping outside. Multiple strangers would share beds to save money. You'd sleep next to people you didn't know, hoping they weren't sick, violent, or planning to rob you. Bed bugs in hotels were so common that travelers would check for them before paying. But even clean-looking beds were usually infested. You'd pay for the privilege of being bitten all night in a slightly warmer environment than outside. The cumulative effect of all these sleep problems destroyed people's health over time. Chronic sleep deprivation caused serious physical problems. Immune systems weakened, making people susceptible to diseases that killed them. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, and other illnesses spread rapidly through populations that were already exhausted. Reaction times slowed from lack of sleep. This led to accidents with tools, weapons, and animals. Men would be kicked by horses, crushed by equipment, or shoot themselves because exhaustion made them clumsy and careless. Mental health deteriorated without proper rest. Depression, anxiety, and paranoia were epidemic on the frontier. Some of this was situational, but chronic sleep deprivation made everything worse. Men would snap over minor issues because they were too exhausted to cope. Judgment suffered from lack of sleep. Poor decisions made while exhausted led to deaths that could have been avoided. Getting lost, making bad business deals, or starting unnecessary fights all stemmed partly from sleep-deprived brains not functioning properly. The aging process accelerated. Frontier people looked decades older than their actual age. The combination of hard work, poor nutrition, and terrible sleep aged bodies rapidly. A 40-year-old frontiersman looked 60 by modern standards. Relationships suffered when everyone was exhausted and irritable. Families fought constantly. Friendships dissolved over minor disagreements. The social fabric of frontier communities was strained by the fact that nobody was ever well rested enough to be patient or kind. Some people simply gave up. The combination of hard work and impossible sleep conditions broke their will to continue. They'd abandon their claims, leave their families, or in the worst cases, take their own lives. The frontier broke people, and lack of sleep was a major factor. So there you have it. Frontier sleep was a nightly battle against discomfort, danger, and exhaustion that nobody ever truly won. No comfortable beds, no safety, no quiet, no rest. Just endless nights of fitful, interrupted sleep that left people exhausted and vulnerable. Makes you appreciate your mattress, climate control, and the fact that you're not sharing your bed with scorpions, doesn't it? Those frontier settlers would be amazed by our complaints about not getting 8 hours of sleep. They'd probably laugh at us for thinking we have it hard when we sleep in temperature-controlled rooms, on comfortable mattresses without the constant fear of being murdered, bitten, or frozen to death. The Wild West wasn't just wild during the day. The nights were even worse, and sleep was just another survival challenge that most people lost.